There we go. Cool. So we are now live. Let's see here how we're sounding. We'll have people popping in here, and we'll give them just a few minutes to kind of, get situated and stuff in here and all that fun stuff. Cool. Everyone, do me a favor. Can you hear everything audio sounding good? Are we crisp? Are we clean? Can everyone hear me? Someone down in the chat, please. Concurrent viewers here, give me a ring here give me a yes if we're being clear and concise on audio. We are also at a delay here too, so I'm sure it'll take just a second for that announcement. But thank you all if you're here and you're hearing me perfectly fine. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being on this first rebirth of the live stream with my good friend Fraser Parker here. It's really, really exciting to have him here with the new Ellusius deck coming out. He's got a new book he's working on that we're going to talk a bit about as well. He's going to share some great stuff. I can't say much more because I don't really fully know. Perfect. Looks like Anthony is saying yes, we're good on the audio side. That's super good here. Right on. I love it. So let's see here. We'll give, 31? Let's wait till 35, Fraser, and we'll kind of give some people a little bit of chance to pop in. Everyone here, if you're, please just introduce yourself in the chat. If you have any questions or concerns, thing like that we can circle back around to, either during the interview or after the interview, or maybe you'll inspire something really great in a good conversation. Just go ahead and put it over here in the chat for us, please. So that way we can clearly kind of know who you are, know where your interests are, and get your question answered by the man himself. Because, catch him while you can. He's international, baby. Super Dunninger, what's up? The ceiling right now, man, and a big hot light here. So that's what's up for the moment. That is what's up for the moment. How about you, brother? The fun part of this is I know we're on a delay. So we'll give a response and they'll probably be sitting there like, why is he taking so long to answer? Was he ignoring me? I need to know this right now. And it's like, you're on a delay. We're on a delay. What can I say? I'm just happy everything's going through on the Zoom and everything so far. It was nerve-wracking setting this up at first. So very, very exciting. Very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's worrying me too is I'm not having the sound come out on because normally I can hit like mute or unmute and it shows the actual of course now my business partner calls me after I haven't heard from him in a few days. Oh, I am missing something here actually. Let's go ahead. Snuck up on me. Is this one dead? Oh, I got a dead one. Let's add a little ambiance here. There we go. There we go. That's better. So yep, we'll give about 2 more minutes here just for people popping in and everything. Again, it sounds like we're clearly, everyone can hear us and everything, which is the best part of this.
Yeah, it looks to be about a 30-second delay, so it's not too major.
Yeah, I'm happy about that. So yeah, we are about like Fraser just said, folks. We are in kind of like a 30-second delay here. So if you have questions, be patient because 1, we got to circle back around. 2, we got to process it, and then we also got to give it back to you, and we have about 30-second delay. So that being said, bear with us. We're all in this one together here. So we'll give about just another couple minutes. Another couple minutes. I will mention for our viewers that are tuning in early here, I'm trying to figure out the best way to distribute this, but one of the tools we've got active on this call, for example, which come to think of it, let's go ahead and resume that. Yep, so one of the tools we have right now is a AI transcription bot that has a complete breakdown and replay of this session, basically. So it's going to have not only the recording, outside of YouTube here, but it's also going to have everything transcribed, and you can also get an AI notes summary of what's discussed and jump to those different points at a button click. It's really exciting. This is something that I've recently discovered, and it kind of dawned on me. This is perfect for this format. So if you want that afterwards, if you go on to, we're going to make a back-end portal here eventually, like a members area for Mystery Arts Inc., where you can have your own login, and every replay you can get that AI notes, which is really, really good. But what we're going to have to figure out something to do is, do we give the code live so you can access the members area, et cetera, et cetera? Because to an extent, we really want you guys to be here live. If you really want the full experience, this is the way to do it. We're kind of like Penguin Live, except we, our host stayed good. So we're really, really excited to be here and everything. So let's see. We're in 35. So, man, Fraser, you ready to go, my friend? You want to dive right into this and get down to the...
Sure. Yeah.
Perfect. So, let me grab here, because again, we're kind of, as we develop this, this live format again, like we're gonna be very conversational. We're just, Fraser and I have known each other for years, but at the same time, I'm making sure that I'm putting in here like good, segments in here. So our first segment here is basically the curtain rises. So, to break the ice here, Fraser, and a kind of a random like left field question, man, if you could have any superpower, what would it be and why, man? Like what about that stands out? And well, actually, I should probably introduce, now that I'm being a bad host now, I should probably introduce you first here, because I'm sure I'm so used to being your friend. I'm like, oh, we can just jump right in, but let's do this. So for those of you that don't know, and again, apologies, I'm just so familiar with Fraser already that I'm like, oh, everyone knows who he is. But there might be somebody out there that, because we even had a post the other day that I know that someone was asking like, hey, I just read this work. It was Helder, I believe, in the mentalism discussion. You remember that one, Fraser?
Yeah. I remember that post coming out. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was asking him stuff, and I kind of pointed him towards like Second Coming and a few other things that by you that I think are a good foundational source, because I think that that's kind of it. While all your stuff is kind of approachable, there are some foundational materials that really establish some of the principles that everything's based off of. So for those of you, the seamless segue here, for those of you that don't know who Fraser is a mentalist that's basically, since he came out the gate, I remember back in the day, the quotes from the 1914 project did, which was True Mysteries, was, the next Luke Germain. Thank God you're not the next Luke Germain. I'm happy you are who you are. And he's taken the world by storm by kind of doing a really serious pivot, starting off and coming in the community with a lot of trance illusion stuff, really diving heavily from the Kenton Knepper school of thinking, using verbal deception and stuff. But he's kind of been able to grow that and accentuate that to new heights, where more than just producing an illusion of a trance or revealing a number between 1 and 10, he's basically pushed the envelope that Pete Turner kind of started and inspired a lot of people's paths on, with what you can do with Propless mentalism, revealing names, places, still producing incredible, like card-related mentalism, and some would say magic in the side of hidden mathematics, and then also applying this hidden mathematics to simple things such as, a coin in hand plot. Just, it goes on, like some of the stuff that you'll see Fraser kind of talk about here today as we go through this interview is, really exemplifying some things I just absolutely, I could never come up with some of the stuff he comes up with, simply because it's so deep. He's a guy that will spend 3 years on one sentence and is totally fine with that. So that being said, welcome to the show here, my dear friend Fraser Parker. Fraser, tell us how your day's going so far, man.
So thanks for having me. Yeah, it's going well. I've just come from where I live to my sister's apartment to sort of get like a quiet space, and I've basically just been writing. That's kind of what my focus has been the past few months. So it's kind of collating and finishing, writing up ideas that I've had over the past 6 to 8 months, essentially. So that's kind of what I've been focusing on, as well as, which we can get to later, a new Kickstarter, but that's kind of running in the background while I finish writing the next book, essentially.
That's exciting, man. And for those of you that don't know the Kickstarter, it's literally, in my opinion, now it took me a long time. I'm not the kind of guy that always went for marked decks. I was very much a purist for a long time. I can say you see, there's a lot of love on this decks. I've used the crap out of them. They've held up great, though. We have the Ellusius.
I've got a new one here, which
Oh, yeah,
I'll
rub it in, rub it in.
I'll send it to you as soon as we finish this. That's cool.
Cool. I appreciate that. Yeah, we'll accept decks of ultimate mark decks of cards for services. But Fraser, kind of do me a favor, man, and we're kind of getting to the point here. We're kind of getting a little bit ahead here, so maybe we should just circle back around to kind of like, because I want to hear. I've seen this since it was the Arcadian deck, which is completely different, that never saw the light of day. I want to kind of know what went into this and what thought process went into that. But let's circle back around to that in the tricks of the trade section. But for right now,
Cool.
we got a good intro in and everything. Let's kind of cover here, who you are and everything. This is called the Curtain Rises, folks. So essentially, we're introducing our guest here and kind of letting a little bit deeper into who they are. So random, weird, but fun icebreaker here, man. If you could have any superpower, what would it be? And honestly, why?
It would probably to stop procrastination. Like one of the things I've noticed more recently is I've had to sort of force myself to sit down and write. So I typically write in the mornings, and I probably have about 2 hours in me, and then I start to sort of drift off and want to do other things, like like look at films or read or something like that. So yeah, it would be kind of, I mean, when I've got deadlines and when I'm under pressure and stuff, I do get stuff done. But the difference with the book that I'm writing at the moment is, compared to the past, typically I would have things that are from my notebooks that I've worked on, and then I would collate stuff and write it, but I would leave the writing until like the last sort of month, like 3 to 4 weeks before the deadline. So it was literally the writing bit. But whereas what I've done along the way in the past 8 months is I've tried to write things up as soon as they're finished, so that's sort of helped. So I've slowly sort of been collating stuff. But I think, yeah, I would get myself to just make it easier sometimes to sit down and focus, But when I am focused, it works, Some days I just find that it doesn't seem to work, the writing, So you kind of sometimes just leave it. Other times it takes an hour or so to get going, and then other times you're in flow, So I suppose that's kind of maybe all writers experience that. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say that from a lot of the friends I know that do author books, and there's all these different ways people do it, right? Like, getting into flow state is not easy, is it, man? Like, once it's either there, it's gone, and you got to cherish it while it's there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's you kind of forget how to write a little bit, if you've had big gaps in between. But I've definitely got a sort of style, so I know when I read stuff back, if it's coming out if it's more difficult, when it sort of doesn't make sense. It makes sense, but the sentence construction. So that's just a technical thing. In terms of like creating, I think I've said this in past interviews, I'm happiest, I think, when I'm creating, because I'm in like a world of my own. And also when you're working on something, you typically love them, out of all of your stuff, the most, what you're sort of currently focusing on, or that's the thing that you're most bothered about at that point in time. And it's a great feeling, sort of being able to solve certain problems or come up with solutions. And when you know that you've got an idea that's sort of like that really sort of turns you on, because it feels like I'm discovering things, you know. It's kind of like if I want to be able to do something, it feels like it's already out there, the solution, and I just have to bring it in. And a good example of that would be my algorithmic stack that I recently released, called Array. So that's a problem that I've been working on and off for probably the last 8 years, I think. So it's like, and then recently I decided to sit down with it again, and this was after I pretty much gave up on it. And then I think over the course of a week, I had even more insights into how it could be solved, because I had like specific stipulations. So it had to be, in my mind, like it had to be easy to teach to others, and it had to be easy to learn, else there was no point. So everything that I did to create that system, I was considering that. And you know, the final piece of the jigsaw fell into place, and I was like, great, that's it. So I was really proud of myself that I managed to finish that after so long. But again, while I was in that sort of process for a week or so, it was great because I had that kind of as a distraction. But it's almost like no matter what's going on in your life, you can go back. You know that you've got this thing that you're working on. And I think Pete said this before, like you've always got magic, right? So whatever's going on in your life, magic isn't, you know, it doesn't leave you, you know, sort of thing, if that makes sense, you know.
Yeah, I think it does make sense, man. And it's like, you know, you try, like I think so many people try to escape it sometimes because they have some of these harsh realities that come in with doing whatever you do. Like, dude, when you set out to become a creator, which I know you can vouch for this big time, Fraser, dude, there are times where things are just absolutely golden and great, and there are times when there's just absolute famine, and you're going, fuck, what am I going to do? You know, would that you say that's true for other people that are looking to kind of replicate what you're doing? Like, would you say that's true to them? Like, what kind of advice would you have to them on that front?
Yeah, so I think the way I look at it is sort of play. So I'm kind of playing around with ideas. But it's almost like I know that the solution's out there. Sometimes it kind of falls into place. I wouldn't say effortlessly, but sometimes it feels more effortless. And other times it's like with the stack, it's something that I have to keep coming back to. And I've had a few things like that. And you tend to, throughout developing effects and methods for so many years, you kind of gain insights throughout the years that you can then look at something with hindsight, which probably helps you to solve it. So it's kind of, I think it's become easier for me to solve things as the years have gone on. Because I remember when I first started out, you mentioned True Mysteries, so all of that was kind of to do with creating what looks like hypnotic control, but because it used words and shifts in perception to make it work, I then kind of went into the okay, how can I use this kind of approach to reading minds? And then, you know, me and a few other peers and friends, we found ways in to do that in different principles, which is but yeah, that's kind of, I went off on a tangent there, but I think in terms of like, I've been asked how do I do it before, and I'm not really sure, but one thing I do is I write scripts, because the method is usually in the words.
Yes.
I write scripts, like I have my laptop open and I'm just sort of playing around with scripting, which means that I can easily quickly edit things. And another interesting thing that I've realized more recently is I tend to, in the past, in some of my books, the way I've written the script seems a little bit wooden. Like it's sort of like you can write it, but you can't say it, right? So what I've realized is that I tend to play the script in my head now, and I keep on refining it until it would be effortless for me to say it. so it fits the way I speak and my personality and how I'm going to say something naturally. And I've gone as far as record myself on video saying the script, and I've sent it to friends as demos and stuff. And then I actually transcribe what I say to when I write it up. And that's great, because sometimes you'll repeat a word which might look wrong or ugly when in terms of prose or when you're writing something out, but it's actually how you naturally speak. So I've realized that it's really important in the past few years to make sure that you're saying the script in your head to get it down, you know. So that's an interesting point that just popped in. But to try and finish up, kind of, I'm not sure the creative process. It kind of feels like there's like, I don't know if you've heard of synesthesia, but when when I'm creating, I tend to see concepts as in like spatially and as colors. So sometimes, it's almost like, and I'm not necessarily consciously aware of it as I'm creating, but I think creativity is kind of the ability to put different concepts together and see what you get out of it, and also finding leverage, you know, because essentially creating a method is, there has to be like a compromise, or there has to be a leverage. But what I try to do is, I think of it in terms of going in the middle. So you've got like the trick method and then the ultimate effect, like the appearance. And I try to bridge the gap between the two and go in the middle of that. So that the words and the effect and the method run along similar lines. So for instance, with True Mysteries, when something didn't work, like you wouldn't be able to get them to not be able to speak for whatever reason, it was still the method, you know, they still didn't know how it would work anyway, because the method was the words, you know. So I just kind of play around. Sometimes it's a certain principle, like an idea, that I then work on and see what I can use it for. Other times it's an effect, and then, you know, like leverage or a way you could do it kind of comes in. Yeah, there was another point I wanted to make. It'll probably come back to me.
Yeah, it's creative process. It's something that, it's so funny because I think that, like, until you've kind of really activated creative process, when you hear things like, you know, it's kind of like syntheses, like things are kind of like colors and concepts and seeing things visually. You kind of, as somebody on the outside that's not, maybe you're not in a creative boost, or maybe you haven't had the creative boost yet. I think that it sounds like, wait, what? Dude, are you okay? Can you talk to somebody? Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, you think like you
Yeah.
get what I mean. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I
but
think people have different modes, right? So, like, there's that NLP thing, isn't there, that people have different faculties for learning. So some people are more auditory. Like, for instance, I imagine songwriters hear melodies and stuff, and you know, that doesn't necessarily happen to me. So I've always been quite visual, like a background in art, and I was good at drawing from a young age. So maybe I've just sort of got that capacity, and that's how it kind of appears to me. But I think creativity is literally just being able to put different things together, right? That's kind of it. So I would say play around and see and look at it to try and get leverage. Like, one of the things that, like, my good friend Ross Bartels, like, he's created some great stuff. And when we've like he's come to me with an idea before, I remember one of the things I said was, it was like this idea of like leverage. It's like, okay, can you get that specific information or part the way there with something that actually streamlines something and makes it more efficient, so that it's actually to do with the presentation and the effect, you know. So one of the things I try to do, and I've done a lot more in the past few years, and people will notice if you follow my work, is really streamlined everything, you know. So this latest book that I'm writing, that's kind of the drive behind it, is, okay, I want to make the material as streamlined as possible. So there's, you know, lots of new stuff and principles, but there's also, you know, it's almost like evolution and a development. So people who've looked at my work from the start will see that slowly these things, you know, sort of progress. And it's to get, like, I want it to be the stuff that, you know, my A set. So it's like, you know, this is, you would just need this book and that's it. If you want to know, you know, how to do the things that I do, you'll just need this book. That's the idea behind this latest book anyway. And I suppose the development is like the evolution. I've been just really quickly, I've been accused of sort of releasing the same sort of effect over and over, like star signs and stuff like this. But typically that's kind of a vehicle for expressing a principle or something like this. So that was one of the points I forgot earlier, and it's about to go again. I'm sorry, but I'm like pretty tired today.
All right, man. We're all making our hustle right now. It's Monday.
So it was to do with using it as a vehicle, I think, right? That's it, right? So, for instance, if you're going to work Proplessly, and that's not to say that all of my stuff is exclusively Propless, which we can get to. If you're going to work Proplessly, then my thinking was, so if you can get a word out of someone's head, then you can pretty much reveal any thought, right? And because words are made up with letters of the alphabet, the leverage there would be, how do you get a letter or letters that they're thinking of? So a lot of the time when I've approached sort of doing word guesses and name guesses Proplessly, the name guess was kind of the way to teach it, because it allowed you to be able to get a name more easily than a word, for instance. So it was a good way to showcase and show off a certain principle that I was working on to get a letter, for instance, or whatever it would be. So it kind of looks like I've gone over the same sort of ground, but there's different principles taught and there's refinements and there's, you know, it's kind of like a journey. So I'm really fortunate and appreciate that my hardcore fan base has stayed with me while I've sort of gone on this journey of discovery, you know.
Yeah, it's really great, man, when you find people that just, because when you're creative and you have a vision, right? Because I'm sure that like, and we, you know, I'm sure we'll go into talking about Kenton quite a bit here too, right? Someone like Kenton Nepper, when he kind of came out with this like verbal deception stuff, right? And this is like, in my opinion, now I'm not discrediting Kenton, I say it, but it's like this is the ice cube that fell off of you know, a conquistador ship back in like the early 1800s that's now grown into sinking the Titanic, you know? You know,
Right.
like, your stuff is so much more robust into like what it does. Now the principles and everything are there. It's just you've taken the principles and added more of okay, this is a definitive beginning and into it, and then the adaptation, what you brought in with like perceptional shifts and stuff, obviously are great too. Like just, God, I still remember actually when you and Ross first kind of came to the realization for a Ouija, and you explained it to me, and I'm like, what? But people have to see that vision, because you know it's hard, because while we have something as a definitive a beginning and end, they still have to experience it. And I think that's why with recent, like, you know, Rapture, which I still go back and watch at least once a year, I always find something new in that. Opus is the same way. I love rewatching Opus. And this ties into what you're saying earlier, people have to see this stuff to believe it sometimes, to see the vision. And it's not always easy, you know? You don't have a film crew following you around. You know, there's iPhones and stuff, but you also don't want to put everything out there like that either, because with some of the verbal methods, while they can be fooling even through the lens of a camera, you know, you don't want people to go into some reverse engineer and then you're at a loss sometimes.
Yeah, that's kind of it, because the method is, because the words and presentation is the method essentially. Magicians and people who know some of our work could try and reverse engineer and stuff like that. So I don't tend to share the performances, you know, because, you know, I know I go out and casually, I typically perform casually, and it works, right? And I have friends as well that, you know, soundboards and friends that test it and use it. And so I don't typically show it, right? but the thing is, it kind of takes like a whole book sometimes for a certain principle, or it needs writing up and thoroughly understanding. Oops, am I still on here?
Yep.
I'll go back to Zoom. Sorry.
Oh, good. Yeah, we didn't lose you or anything.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, what was I saying?
You were saying like it takes so much a book to go through a concept because
Oh, okay, yeah,
you don't want to always
like,
share. You're a casual performer. Yeah.
or it needs writing up and reading. And sometimes I say in the introduction to books is to read through it a few times, right? And the reason for that is sometimes I teach things not out of place, but I assume that I'm working off the assumption that you would read the whole thing. It's almost like not necessarily listening to an album, but because there might be something that I've taught somewhere else. So if you skip through, then you might miss something, right? So it kind of takes like, this is why I like writing things down as well, because it allows me to, and I typically release my material through the written form, because it allows me to really make sure that every point is in there, nothing's missed. And it's scripting. So it's kind of like, I think the benefit with video stuff, so I'm going to try to be filming more stuff, is people can see sort of the beats and see how I'm saying it and the timing and everything, right? So I think, they both can be useful. Like, I think the two together are quite good, like if you do have performances, but I don't tend to air those performances.
Yeah, and I think it's fair too, man, because the thing is, at the end of the day, like, and I think, and I've heard this before too, and I've kind of gone to war for you sometimes on people that are like, oh yeah, but he's republished this so many times. It's like, well, dude, there's a huge difference between like a Ouija to like what you've done recently, right?
Right.
All
So
name guesses or word guesses, but they're completely different mechanisms and principles. And sometimes it's like, if more magicians actually knew sales, they would appreciate you. Would be a god among men to everyone. There wouldn't be as much fucking debate. And the reason is this, right? Because as a salesperson, sometimes you're going to read a book or you're going to a sales conference to learn one word or phrase. And that could be the difference between saying fair enough and fair enough. And it can be that. And that is kind of what really vibes about your work, man. And, in a segue to that, because I'm curious, when you see other people do your stuff, like, because I'm sure you get videos, people send you stuff, and they're like, hey, this didn't work or this didn't work. And I think we've talked about this in the past. I actually wrote a little essay, I think, extra for Ouija back in the day when I was thinking of this. Personality injection is so needed in this, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are your thoughts on that when you're like interjecting who you are? Because, for example, they just read your words. Yes, they can get an effect, but it's sometimes not the words you say, it's how you say them. It's your tonality, right?
Yeah. So basically, like the scripting is there because it's a pattern, and you will need to say the sentence structures that I've written out, but you can find ways to do that how you speak as well. So my friend Dragan Hibbler's really good at that. So when I've soundboarded things with him, he would perform it back to me, and he would still hit all of the moments and beats that he needed to get the effect to work, because the method would be in the words. But it was his style, right? So I think that, yeah, you can like easily do that. Another thing is, when I've seen, like, not often, but like once, I think I remember someone performed something and they missed like a key line and got lucky, So like, it's almost like the words have their weight in gold. Like, because the reason I have obsessed about the exact scripting so much is because I know that each word and each sentence is key to making it work. Like, you miss one thing and there's a reason for sort of everything. So so there's that. And the other thing is, I think like a confidence in performance as well. Like you sort of have to believe it's going to work yourself, else it won't. And it's kind of like real mentalism. Like I remember the O Force, like Ross Taylor's O Force. I went through sort of like weeks where I couldn't get it to hit, and then weeks of it hitting, which was weird because it shouldn't be like like I got close sometimes, you know. And then I thought, wow, do I have to take this out? But I think it was my own sort of confidence with it. And I think Pete's talked about this before about psychological forces and other people from the past. It's like if you believe that it's going to hit, it will, and then if otherwise you can sabotage yourself. It's kind of like real mentalism. So as well as sort of believing in what it is you're doing in the moment, you've got a kind of silent script working for you as well, because you know that you are using words and psychology to make it work. So all of my stuff uses kind of like shifts in perception. Sometimes like the reframe that Ross and me came up with, he like that is kind of like a really sort of hard like change of reality. It's kind of like crowbarred in, but it works, right? So that you totally readjust what they assume should have happened. And worst case, they think that the performer is operating from a wrong reality. So it just allows the deception to take place. But then with Second Coming, we created a softer version of that, which was nice. And the reason I say we both came up with it, like it's interesting. Like Ross had this in his notebooks, and he literally like finished Ouija by applying the reframe, right, which was from his notebooks. So it's like great, you know. But looking back on it, I realized that I had these eye closed cues, which were kind of an early reframe because it was kind of like happening in real time. And I mentioned that to him. So it's just interesting that because me, him, and a few others were all sort of like almost for the first time, like trying to come up with these ethereal methods. We were all sort of like in the same sort of space. So like Springboard by Michael Murray, you know, there's like similarities to something that I was doing in one of Kenton's early like mind reading lessons. But you know, not to say like Michael's, it's great what he's done. I'm not claiming anything. It's just interesting that we was all sort of working in that space. Like Pete Turner with his snap change as well, like not the Ed Marlowe snap change. There's kind of a reframe happening there as well, right?
Yeah, there is.
But it's something that I've kind of left the reframe behind because the methods since second coming, I think there's still a reframe in Opus, but I've kind of found other ways so that it doesn't just have to rely on as like a big part of it, that reframe of reality. But it was a real interesting sort of tool and concept that Ross came up with. It was really cool. But yeah, the reason I'm saying that is because I don't want people to think who have seen like the reframe work that everything I do is a reframe, because it's really not, you know.
It's a lot of, I mean, I've noticed lately you've really gone into like the invisible mathematics space big time. Like, I think, well, Ian Rowland, who we know, I love me some Ian. Ian's a good boy. He's a lad, but he's a tough lad. Like, for Ian to say something you showed him is like, wow, and he writes about it is incredible. So there's that moment, I think, is Blackpool a number of years ago when you had just started going into the witch hand, right?
Oh yeah, so I think that was Michael's thing. It was Minds that I showed him it, and I remember him just being sat there with his mouth open, and then just shaking his head like fucking crazy, you know, like you've come up with that. Yeah.
It's so nice, man. And you'd obviously had earlier works into that with what was it? Was it Utsukushi? Was that the one with it was kind of reverse pin gas, and you had like the reduced down like
yeah. So the one Ian Rowland saw was in the Book of the Fallen, and it's in Opus. And essentially it is derived from maths, but it doesn't appear like there's any maths involved because I, on purpose, hid the fact that what was essentially happening, right, without tipping it. And it just looks like presentation. So again, you know, kind of hiding things with the presentation. So like one of my good friends, we get into like a discussion, and we tend not to go there anymore because like one time it got really sort of like, because we're both passionate, and you know, the people in the room, like they were sort of like, my God. So yeah, we kind of don't go there anymore, but his thinking is, you know, and he's probably right. His thinking is that the method doesn't matter. Like you create the effect by any means, which is fine. But I feel like I'm trying to bridge the gap, like I said before. So I'm working with a compromise, but I think there's like certain people feel that I'm working from the wrong end, you know. But this is what turns me on. I focus on Propless because that's what turns me on. That's what how I want. I want to try and push the art form that way, or the methods, and try and find ways to do it using words and shifts in perception. So that's just kind of what I focus on, and my fans seem to like it as well. And it's kind of just, that's kind of it, really. So I can't really, you know, excuse it really, because it's like, you know, there's the right method for different situations. This for me is something that is great in a casual situation. And you wouldn't necessarily just perform Propless, you know, you would use this in with other things as well. So,
Oh, sorry. Go on. I was going to say.
Yeah. So just to finish the point on the invisible mathematics, it's kind of like, sometimes it's more overt, right? So like there's another witch hand that's in the new book that gets them to, oh yeah, it uses like personal information, and there's a way to get a star sign using that as well. So, but again, you know, it'll be with the star sign, it'll be for them to generate a life number, and then you give a reading. But it's so quick and so streamlined. Yeah, that's kind of it. I'm sort of always looking for like the most streamlined approach, basically. So yeah, and more recently, I've kind of, because I used to teach it bare bones. So I mean, I still don't like to give them like a flowered up script because they can add to it, but there's enough in there for what I'm doing to be justified and make sense presentationally. But for me, it's fun to find like a way to do something that's hidden in with the presentation, you know?
Absolutely.
So it's kind of a weird thing to sort of try and argue about or think about, like talk about, I mean, like you can think about it, because all we're really doing is hiding, is we're using a compromise or a method to create the illusion of magic or mind reading, right? That's kind of what we're always doing. The argument is that you should think about the effect that you want to create and then get a method. So by any means, whereas I'm trying to sort of go in the middle. I'm trying to work with the compromise and the effect and see what I can produce just using words. So that's kind of how I see it. But you know, I might be completely wrong. But
No, I think
man. In my mind, I've created like a body of work now that I can take sort of the best bits or the A set, like in my mind, like what I would use. And it wasn't there when I got into magic. And that's how I want to perform. All those are the Propless things that I want to include in sets, along with other stuff. So if nothing else, I've kind of done it for myself, right?
Yeah, and I think that most great, like for example, we look at like, you know, probably a personal favorite and hero of yours. Like we look at something like Tom York and Radiohead. What a weird sound out the gate. Like they're coming out at a time when everyone's trying to sound like a grunge band from Seattle.
Yeah.
And they still had like, their song like Creep, and it's still a great song. It's the commercial one of all of them though, right? Like if someone said, like for you as a Radiohead fan, I see the head shake. So you're gonna pick up and throwing down here, right? So when somebody, for example, goes and you go, "Oh, do you like Radiohead?" and they go, "Yeah, I love Creep. It's one of my favorites." You hit us go,
Yeah.
"Ah, okay, so Weird Opasia is yeah, King of Limbs. You have no idea." You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And I think they created that for themselves because when in the absence of something that you
Mm.
feel a connection and deep drive to, and the excuse at the end of the day is people deemed it impossible or people just didn't put in the effort to make it. A little bit of effort goes a long way. I mean, for God's sake,
Yeah.
you
Like I agree that some of the earlier stuff, it wasn't fully formed or fully finished. But I had to start somewhere, right? And there's still principles in there. So it was kind of like you see like the evolution of Radiohead. But one thing they didn't want to do is repeat themselves. And it looks like I repeat myself with premise, but I'm kind of finding principles. But I will, but every now, when I take on new premises, it turns me on as well because I think, okay, what would be my way of doing this? And then some beautiful stuff falls out, like Noki, for instance, like a thought of card. Like in my head, I wanted it to be completely hands off. So the spectator shuffles the deck. I'm looking away. They think of one as they shuffle and they shuffle again, and I don't go back to the deck. It kind of needed to be that clean. And then I found like after weeks and Pete Turner thinking I was losing it, going down a hole, it dropped in. I was like, that's it. And with everything else I considered, but I got the solution. So it was like, and it was something that I don't think had ever been done before. So and some people would argue, well, does it matter that you don't touch the deck? So, well, to me, it did, because that's what I was going for. So if you do want to do it where you don't touch the deck and they're across the room, you can do, right? Or whatever, or just do it because it's hands off,
well,
I know that it's fooled magicians. I know that's not always important, but
yeah,
if you can fool magicians, then it's pretty fucking strong, right? Like you're going to fool lay people as well. But there's the argument that do they know the difference? Like a cross-cut force is just as powerful, but I don't know. But I have certain sort of stipulations and visions, and I try and find it. And then my fans, like seem to like it, so that's good. And it's creating something that ways of doing like effects or ways to do stuff that's never been done. So
yeah,
that's if
you're
I'm
gonna
honest, that's
people
what I
off
like
when you do
doing.
it.
Yeah, like I like to try and create the impossible, right? And sometimes it's pushing it into those realms. Like, can they shuffle the deck? Like the
Yep.
card at number stuff, like Aslan, different versions that I've got. Can I be hands off? So stuff like that. So when I see a new premise or start thinking about a new premise, sometimes that's really cool as well because whatever I'm doing creatively, something that's normally quite different, like comes out, right? And don't want to sound like, it feels like I'm discovering it for myself as well. Like however it works, it's working. And I'm just as excited when I solve something or find something.
Yeah, I've
You
seen
know,
it firsthand. I have seen points in our knowing each other, which is we're getting close to 10 years, buddy. You ever think about that?
yeah, yeah, I do, yeah, sometimes.
It's mind blowing to me. Like I've seen when the light bulb hits you, and it's for you, it's a complete state change. Like because
Mm.
you're a very chill guy, you're very relaxed. When it happens though, it's like this crouching tiger, hidden labyrinth just jumps out in you, and you're like, "Oh my God, I just realized this," and it's a complete change of
Yeah.
like of state. And you know what the thing is, man, and I was thinking this, and I kind of said this while you were, or while you were coming in, while you were saying this, but the thing is, like, where people I think miss out, because there's two things, like This is good about you and I being kind of more casual performers than anything. I can say things that I don't think other magicians, one, will like, but two, I can back them up and kind of in a lot of ways. Like I don't know how to explain this the right way, but I think all magicians have this big mindset, or mentalists have this big mindset that they has to work on stage, has to be on stage, has to do this. Bro, for the love of fuck. Have you ever just looked over and just gleamed a piece of information, like shoulder
Yeah.
to get a pin code or something, or a phone code or something? Dude, that's just not going to work on stage as much. If you get on stage, great. But like in Fraser, and too, if you're doing your own like a stage show, which I know you've done platform stage, you know, you're not really throwing the Propless stuff in as much. Like there are components of it there because it's super important, like gypsy name guess, things like that. Like I use that like crazy, gypsy name guess. Someone starts with a J. And but I think people think it has to be this surefire stage thing, and they're
No,
missing the actual
okay.
point that it's just a social, like this is experience away from that. There's far less compromise in this, and it's more real because you're not, you know,
Right. So for me, it feels more real, even though what does that even mean? Because it should be like another way I look at this, right, is if I was going to portray a magician, then yes, like you would do it by any means, right? But then certain means I've got a real problem with. I don't know why. I just really have. And then, like doing a thread hookup, it's like, no, I'm not doing it. Well, that's just my problem, right? So, and sometimes without, so I would rather get something flat out wrong than do a top change and get out of it that way. I don't know why. It's just fucking how my head works. So it's almost like I'm trying to go for like a purist thing, whatever that is, and bridging the gap and then finding it that way, right? But it's just an approach like Propless, and I'm not saying that you would just exclusively do Propless, right? Because I've said in the past you can mix methods. So one can bolster the other, right? So if you've got a method where someone writes something down and you've done something else in the same set that didn't need them to write it down, then they cancel out. So there's that working for you as well. Sometimes it's quicker just to really quickly shift something in someone's head or get something with Propless, right? Or it takes as long as them writing a billet. And so really the idea is like, I know some people would think you're restricting yourself with presentation, but sometimes the presentation that would be added to billet work anyway is is the fucking method, right? So it's like it kind of, it's just different. So I feel like for me it feels more real, even though I don't know what that means, simply because even from a silent script perspective, I'm using words to create shifts in perception and get in there. So one of the arguments in the past was it's too process heavy. Maybe that was the case right at the start, or with things like, the Martin Gardner elephants in Denmark, and didn't make much sense. Right. So, but I've been doing this for so many years now. You can see the progression in the work, that keeps on, being as streamlined as possible. That's the idea. And, me and a few of my friends, like I said to Pete Turner, like a few years ago, I said, like, if we went back like 4 or 5 years and showed the group what our peers and friends had come up with, we probably wouldn't believe it, right? Like how far it's come. So I'm not saying to use it exclusively, but I'm quite lucky that like my approach is a casual environment, right? So I wouldn't necessarily use it on stage, or like you say, there'd be certain bits that you would probably do, because stage is a very different sort of thing. And corporate as well, you would need things that reset that are quick, that are just attention grabbing and stuff like this. So I suppose there's a time and place for this, right? But all I'm interested in is performing casually. So if I did do a show, because I don't work a lot unless it's like for private, people ask me. But I do go out and perform casually a lot. So if I was to do that, I would have like a table, and people would be told that I'm there, and then I would tell the next to the group to get someone else, and that gives me like an intimate sort of casual sort of setting where like you can perform for 5-8 minutes with a group, and then another group comes. So I'm not just sort of going table to table while people are trying to eat and stuff like that. So it's a very different sort of way to perform theatrically. So that, you know, I hope, like I've made that distinction in interviews before.
Yeah.
But hopefully people, you know, as they get into it, maybe they won't realize so much, but they'll know sort of like what material suits different venues and different environments. But what's cool is you know, they can sometimes like just throw it in, right? And then just hit things that are looking impossible because it's quite quick. I think like some routine, they were like 30 seconds to get it, or a minute, you know, which a billet would take that long anyway, right?
Yeah, because you have to. The thing is, I think it's something else people are missing and why they're not succeeding. I do want to transition. I have a couple questions here too from people, and I'd love to see their answer because it ties in the conversation we're having. But I want to, before I bring that question, I want to bring up an example from not last night, but the night before. Because listen, everybody, when I say wiki test, all of you actually go to, oh yeah, that thing's surefire as shit. Like that's. What? Okay. So I use rows to get my wiki test for the word, right? I use that and I love it. I love it. And now I've used it in the past as well, and this ties into this too. Like the Propless methods can be a saver as well. So listen to this story, and you tell me that rows and Propless methods, but the sure did not tell me that it didn't save a surefire air quotes effect, and I'll call you a liar. So
yeah, I actually had someone leave the billet empty once and used rows.
Yes, that's also happened in professional things, or they look like they have like they've got like some kind of, you know, disorder where they can't write, and you're like, oh my gosh, like chicken scratch. Or have you ever had the I'm too smart and I secretly know Korean person fill out the billet? Yeah, trust me, it's a nightmare. You're looking at what looks like a sketch done by a very eloquent like artist. And you're like, what does that even mean? But I've used to save me more. So Wikitest the other night, I'm doing it, and I'm fairly new to Wikitest. I'm still I don't have any of the words memorized, so I'm still using cribs and stuff in it. But you need the first, for those of you who don't know, it's very MOBAT, very they're all book tests. We're not giving much away here. Once you know that first letter, it kind of gives you the rest in the snake eating its own tail, right? So I'm out here and I do rows to get it, and I get an in. Like I get an in as in they begin the word. You know, for those who know rows, you get what I mean. I get a read that says that the word starts with im. That's what I'm trying to say. It starts with im, and I'm going in my head. Wait a second. None of the words start with an im, and instantly my brain goes, "Oh, Shazbot." So what I do is I first throw out one of the words at random, and if they're like, nope, sorry, and I'm like, hold on, I think this word is it kind of like a word that's double? This is a grayed out whenever you get something wrong, by the way. Is it kind of a word in it that it's kind of like a word in a word thing? I don't know why, but most people say yes to that, right? So I'm sitting there going, crap, what am I going to do? And then I thought, oh yeah, that's right, I've got a one ahead. So I won ahead the thing, because what I found out I had done is I had canceled out what was necessary for them to think what I needed them to think. And to those who know Wikitest, you feel me. And it wasn't an instruction thing, it was an all me thing, right? And rows saved my gourd, basically, right? And it saved my gourd before. I knew beforehand what I was supposed to do. So, you know, I thought maybe because of the accent I'd understood wrong, but I've used it in that case. I've had the Asian kid that's writing in kanji and thinks he's going to trip me out. I've had the person has chicken scratch writing or writes "you guess" on it. I've had that happen, dude. It sucks. Tell me, mentalists and magicians, what do you do in that situation? Well, if you have a Propless method that you do anyway, and here's the other thing you guys need to think about. If you do a billet read and you still use rows as a process, you still use any name guess as a process, you're practicing it with a safety net.
Yeah.
Guaranteed out, folks. Guaranteed. So, well, as you can see, not a guaranteed out, but it's at least you're there working on it more. And what happens, you become intuitive. You become something, once it's like Fraser's saying here, once you have like the confidence to do it, which is your biggest holding back mechanism, and you have a 10 certainty on being able to deliver this.
So it's probably a good place real quick to talk about mixing it or failure, because I would say, and I'll be quick, I've talked about this before, but I think it's worth mentioning. So I would typically perform, in a set, let's say I do one Propless thing and it hits, then I might do another one. And then if one thing misses, I'm still going to end the set with something else because I'm mixing it with more traditional methods as well. And sometimes I've failed something on purpose if I just keep on hitting. But you can pretty much keep on going until something misses with Propless, right? But I would mix the two. So you wouldn't necessarily I have done it before where I've sort of had nothing on me, and I've done probably half an hour, but I would always be mixing it in a set. So that's important. So even though methods might be 90% hit rates, if you do your job right, then you can still mix the two. And I think, as well as it feeling I used to believe that the audience could feel the difference as well, because they could feel that you was using words to manipulate stuff, psychologically, to create this illusion or the effect. So I'm not sure if that's still the case or if it's important. But I sort of operate from that belief that what I'm doing really is moving things in the head. It's kind of like Pete's called it psycho-mechanical before. Instead of it being sort of mechanical in terms of physical slides, you're moving thoughts and manipulating thoughts to get an outcome that appears magical. And I think Banachek's talked about that before as well. So yeah, just to finish that, just to make sure we finish the point on the approach, essentially. So yeah, carry on.
Wonderful. Well, we have some questions, man. And before we get into, because what next I kind of want to look into here is we've covered Propless, the apparent woes. We've covered the, hey, dude, this is how you do this. This is how the real way this works. Because the problem, I think, at the end of the day was back in the day when a lot of the detractors you still have, I think, are people that, one, they don't understand the importance of refinement and how, just like you fine tune a gimmick, we all might have bought what's a good example? We all might have bought let's use a thread reel. We all might, and this one applies to me personally. We all might have bought a thread reel, right? And we've been super disappointed with it. It was original ITR. So we go and try and use regular thread, and then we can't do that. And we hate it. And then the loops, but you're loops are too visible or they suck. And then you find just the perfect device, right? Whether that's a tarantula for you, whether that's, the Venom system for me, which is, I've loved it. It's fixed it for me. But moral of the story, these are little refinements that make a bigger whole, just like these words that go into Propless. So now from all of you watching this, if you've seen this, and if you're watching this in the future, you have this in the notes to click on, you've learned how where Fraser's come from, how this stuff developed, why the shift happened, what goes into creating this kind of stuff, and how to, some solid tips for your own creativity. You've been able to hear a little bit about some of the invisible mathematics and things and how Fraser looks at that. You have a flawless way to start utilizing Propless. So if you're the guy that's had Second Coming for 2 years and you've just never tried anything out of it out of pure fear, brother, you've got a 10 certainty on that billet read, don't you? Well, for the love of God, why don't you just billet it and just don't read it and try and do the Propless thing for it? You've got a surefire way to get out of it. You got a surefire way to approach this. So if anyone's on the fence on this or we need a clarification, comment here. But that being said, here's some of the questions we've got that I think are related in a way. So one thing that Hungry and Hungover, which thank you, you're a great supporter. I love Hungry and Hungover, great name too. You know, what's the most, he asked what's the most surefire psychological force? And I think that's I appreciate the question. I think it's the wrong way to ask it. And I think, Fraser, you kind of vibe with me on this. What would you say to that? Like the most surefire psychological force?
So yeah, I think I get what you mean. There probably isn't one, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of like psychological forces are useful, but you would typically use them within the context of something where it wouldn't necessarily matter if you fail or if you are relying on that force. It would be sort of well over the chances of failure, right? So I mean, there's a force in God mode, and it's the principle is going to be in the new book as well. I've got something with colors, which is, I would say, like well over 90%. So what I did, because I found that, I discovered that, it meant that I could link it to other things to get leverage in like a star sign guess and different things. But I think most psychological forces aren't as reliable in terms of like, think of a number and then it would be like 7 or 3, you know? So I don't think there's really an answer to that. But the thing I did was I took something and created a polarity with it, which meant that the odds went way above. Like I would just pretty much assume that it was always going to work. So yeah, does that answer it? Or, I mean, I think I'm not sure that there's really something you could just say, oh, that's the most surefire. Like there are some that are more than others, is my point. You know, like Pete's got a great way of forcing categories and stuff like this, and it's not necessarily surefire, but he's built in specific outs, which allows him to most of the time just get it through really clean. And it doesn't matter if he's using the outs. Spider force.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was gonna say that was my first Turner adapted to me, and I still I've known him 10 years, and it's still one of the most performed things I do. If you actually see me ever out in the real world, and I'm with normal people, if I'm with magicians, I'm probably not gonna perform for you, dude. I want to talk to you. So normal people too, and maybe we can have a side tangent on this too, because I'm curious about your thoughts on this, Fraser. You know, and we'll get to this in a moment, I think, because I do want to hear about the Eleusis deck here in a moment, answer just a couple more questions that have come in. But, you know, one of the things I want to talk about, so make sure we loop back around, is when is it the right time for I'm going to show you something, and when is it the right time for, or I'm going to lead you somewhere to show you something, you know, conversationally, or when is the right time for just let conversation be conversation because it's more magical than what you have to show? You know, I think that's an important distinction. We'll cover that here in a second. But there's two things on here I want to get circled back to. Now, from Means Kim, you know, and I think this is one you'll enjoy this topic here, Fraser. What is the Holy Grail effect you wish you want to create? Basically, what would be what's your dream Holy Grail, brother?
So I think going back to what I said before about being able to get a word, I think that's kind of the ultimate, and I've kind of got fairly close with that with sui generis principle. I feel like that's the closest I've got to just being able to like really easily get like letters to then build a word or name that they're thinking of, and it's great because it's so versatile. It kind of, like, I remember testing it out when it first dropped in because it was one of them moments where I went to bed and I think within 2 minutes it had dropped in and I was like, fuck, if that works, that's cool. And then I scribbled a note on the phone, and I remember waking up the next morning and just with a grin on my face because I'd remembered what had come in. And then I built a few routines around it, and then so for me that's the closest I've got to kind of finding like a grail, in terms of being able to effortlessly get words or letters, right? And what's really cool about that is when I was testing it, it would, like typically with name guesses, in the UK at least, we've restricted it in the past to male names. Whereas this, I got Penelope, like I tried it on my girlfriend at the time, and I just nailed like Penelope like within like 20 odd seconds, and it was just like, yeah, I know that this is like a utility kind of thing, So yeah, so sui generis is kind of as close as I've got to it, and I think if I was going for like a holy grail, it would kind of be that, a way to get words and letters and numbers effortlessly. So the other thing with numbers is the reason I've focused on that quite a bit as well is because there's letters and there's numbers, so it's kind of like both can be useful. But there's not really been good ways to get numbers before, There probably wasn't letters really properly, but until we did it. But it's kind of like so that's something that I keep coming back to as well as numbers,
Yeah. Well, there's so many premises and classic premises and Holy Grail premises too. Like I think everyone's kind of moved away from a while from like the pin code reveals, because there's a lot of good ones out there. Between you, Pete, obviously, Thaddeus Barker and his
an interesting thing that happens with pin reveals is sometimes it makes more sense in reverse. So I've kind of done like I've got like a reverse version, which Pete first came up with using Michael's springboard. The other thing about numbers is, if I can remember, is it's interesting how you would hide it, right? So that it doesn't feel like maths. So like there's a few versions of this, but I think I've got one that's just about finished, that's going in the new book, where it's to do with the number you was trying to send them, and the way it offsets, it's maths, but it doesn't look or feel like maths whatsoever. So again, taking something that's happening, like sometimes like to create peaks, it could be like a card move, right? So you could take something like something mathematical and hide it, because now you're not dealing with sort of like this minus this, for instance. You're changing it from an equation to words and hiding it in presentation. So it's the difference between the thought that you were trying to send them, for instance, without giving too much away and tipping it. So yeah, just a few. These are just things that have come back to me that I forgot while they're talking. So,
yeah, no, dude, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, man. Like it's like I've seen a little bit of sui generis. I need to really dive deep and get that kind of programmed in my head, because I've been on this weird visual magic bender lately. But like I'm looking to come back and really dive deep, because it is a lot of this stuff. Like you were saying earlier, if you don't have this level 10 certainty, you'll notice I lean on that phrase a lot now. If you don't have that level 10 certainty that in yourself, where you believe this is going to work and you believe this is its margins go down substantially, and sometimes you have to build that up in other ways, like we kind of went on earlier. Another question I saw come in here, and we were talking about this earlier, so it's going to be an easy one. What is Fraser's favorite billet peak? He says he's always looking for more, since he decided to stay away from peak wallets and imp pads. And Hungry and Hungover again, my compatriot that's always on my videos. I appreciate him. So what are your thoughts on that? I know the answer to it, but I'm gonna let you go on this one.
Yeah, we actually talked about this before.
Yeah,
we went live. So it's boudoir card reading by Doc Hilford, and it's just great. I use like a variation on the close-up handling that he teaches, that was one of his friends. And without tipping it, the handling I came up with, for those who know it, is the Pete Turner thing of having them write on the billets while they're in your hand, so you've got a surface. And those who know the method, so I would look away and cover what they're writing, and then I would come down, and the bigger action would then let you get on with the method. And it's just, for me, the reason I came up with use that handling is because it means that I don't have to fumble or move around or reposition anything. It just happens like smoothly. So that's a go-to peak. As well as that, my Dragon Peak that's on Opus. Like just while we're here, I think Opus is something that for people that are new to my work, it's kind of got a lot of stuff on there from the past sort of 3-4 years. So I think that's kind of a good resource because it's discounted on my website just for people who are new to this approach and want to sort of get, a feel for what I've created.
And I can verify with 100, and again, like, trust me, I love nothing more than talking up my friends. You can ask Fraser, and you can ask everybody I talk to about each other. I'm constantly like, oh, I fucking love that guy, best person, so genius. I'm just one of those guys. I always blow a little bit of smoke up my friend's ass, but it's true smoke. Like everything I say, that's true. Opus is absolutely pivotal, I think, that if you really want to nail this stuff out, because again, you're going to see it in action. You're going to see it play. Fraser, I sent you on a related note to Opus. I sent you because you guys had actually. I know you'd lost some of the footage from Rapture, and I think I had a whole file of it left. I sent over to you. Have you made that available yet? Because I think Rapture is another one. Because Opus, you have some like performance of people and everything. In Rapture, you guys have groups of people, and there's some mechanical stuff in there too. I think that both those resources combined, you could literally like and I know how you are, Fraser. You're like, I don't want to resell like older stuff. But for the right people that it's either A, not clicked, or B, they're like, I want to know more. I need to. I want to understand.
Yeah.
I think
So. I mean, if people like message me privately, then I can work that out. But I'm reworking on my website, and I'm purposefully sort of keeping things more current now. And if we were to revisit, I would probably do that with Ross because after years of like Ross has been away from it for years. But it would be cool. And we recently met up again at Blackpool, which was so good to see him. It was great. So I don't know, like if we ever revisited any of that, then I'd have to talk to him about it, I think. But if you wanted to get like a downloadable version of Rapture, then come to me and and Ross would still get half of that because it was a project that we did together,
Yeah. Both are absolutely great. I highly recommended. Like I would say, go for that 110%.
I mean, the other way of, I know I'm aware that we've sort of talked quite a bit about stuff that doesn't necessarily, it's like theoretical or looks, sounds really sort of ethereal or theoretical. So, like, do you want to try something? Because
of course. And and by the way, to clarify, we're together at Blackpool, but we were off the rails the whole time, doing everything but performing or talking this stuff, which is usually how it is. But I haven't, it sounds like you got something fresh to basically pull out, and I'm really excited about that.
So, because people have mentioned like Holy Grails type stuff, I want to show you like Sui Generis in action. But this is actually like it's an effect from God Mode, which was kind of the sequel to Sui Generis, but it also was like half a book of Sui Generis and half a book of other stuff. So
Cool.
So I'll try this because it kind of shows you how quickly you can proplessly get to something, right? And hopefully people will see that presentationally it sort of all fits together and makes sense. So just so that you can't be influenced or fall into any patterns that you'd typically go for, I want you to just think of a random letter of the alphabet. So if this is like a vowel, then change it to something else because everyone would tend to go for a vowel, for instance.
Okay.
Okay, so the reason I get you to go to a random letter is to help you create a random word, because otherwise, maybe there's certain things people would think of. So what we need to do now is create a fairly long or interesting word that contains this letter somewhere within this word. So just use it essentially to jump off to another word.
Okay.
Okay, so right now, be honest, is there any way I could know this word?
No. I'm
Okay,
waiting for some kind of reframe or something. No.
okay, cool. So we haven't set anything up just for everyone, at home and stuff. So there's no way on earth I could get this. So just focus on the word for me.
Okay.
Just, do you know what? I don't think I'm going to get this. But that's okay. I think I know why. So just out of interest, what word did you just come up with?
Butterfly.
Okay, so I think the reason, be honest with me, did you change it from something else?
Yeah.
What was the other word?
Giraffe.
Okay, so yeah, I'm just not, I wasn't able to get that basically, but that's cool.
Okay.
So let's try it this way, right? Go back to the letter that you just were focusing on.
Okay.
Okay, so just we'll completely start again. Okay, so just I want you to imagine you're back at school and
Yeah.
you're a child, and like when we learned the alphabet, we'd do it with pictures, like images. So like A would be for apple, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And you typically think of like I don't know, like an animal, a simple object or a fruit. So based on the letter that you had in mind before, can you just think of a simple image that begins with this letter?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so I'm going to go with just imagine the image in front of you.
Okay.
So this would be. I'm going to go for this. In fact, I'm going to change my mind. So what did you just think of?
I ended up on gorilla.
A gorilla.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was on an F, but that's fine. So that just didn't work that time. But sometimes this doesn't work, sometimes it does. But essentially what I'm going for there is so your word was giraffe, right?
Yeah.
So you placed it first in the word, which is fine.
Oh,
So typically something else would happen there, but that's cool. But yeah, so really, because we're friends, I'm not getting out of it in the way that I would in performance. It wouldn't seem like anything is a problem at that point, because you're just essentially trying to get in tune with their thoughts, right? So you
right.
just
Exactly. At this point, all you need to say is, "Cool." That tells me all I need to know about you,
yeah,
or even like one ahead it. But it doesn't make sense in this context because you see a one ahead from a mile away, right? But I mean, yeah, it's one of those things that just you get used to that too, right? Like, and that's what you got to do is you got to be like, "Huh, it didn't work. It tells me everything I need to know about you." Here,
that's it.
just print that down. That way we can have verifiable proof. Because if I had just said you're thinking of X, you could have been lying for me. This way we have definitive proof. Blah 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 blah. You know what I mean? You always have an
Yeah,
out. You know?
yeah. So I want to try it again, right? Because I think like we're friends, and we've probably I've probably shown this before, and certain outs are stuck in your head. So I want to try it again, right? So just completely just try and be a spectator as much as you would, right?
Yes, sir. All right.
Okay, so shortcut and sort of a quick way. So just to keep this random, just get a letter of the alphabet in mind.
Okay.
Okay, so if this is a vowel, change it, because people tend to go for vowels. And what we need to do now is create a word, like make it fairly long and interesting, that contains that letter somewhere within the middle of this
Oh,
new word. So don't put it at the front or back end. So again, that's like a key line that, if you don't put in it, it can. So right now you've got a word in mind.
hold on. I'm still coming up with one to make sure. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Great. So now this is like why it seems so much like a failure before, right? Is because I'm purposely failing at this point, and it's to get leverage in the method. So Is there any way I could get this? No, just focus on it. So I don't feel like I'll be able to get this, and I think I know why. So just out of interest, what word did you just create in your head?
Cancun.
Okay, cool. So I think I know why, because this isn't something that would necessarily be a word that I would be aware of, right? Or visual in nature. So let's try this a different way. Using the letter that you were focused on before, I want you to just create a, like, you know, when you were back at school, the way we would learn the alphabet, it would be pictorial. So A would be an image of an apple, so on and so forth. So this would either be like an animal, a fruit, or a simple object. So based on this letter that you're on before, I want you to think of an image that begins with that letter.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I feel like this is an animal.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to go with. In fact, just look at me. I'm going to just. So it's something that you could potentially hold.
Yeah.
I'm going to say a cat, as opposed to. Yeah, genuinely. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I was stuck between cat and caterpillar and went back to cat.
Great. Okay, cool. And something that's interesting as well, if you wanted to use an out with this, because obviously I'm fishing like in a visual nature there, because I think that that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
So there's something that I'll.
Oh shoot! You know what? You have shown me this before. It just hit me. Yeah, I know it screwed up. I got okay. Yep. I know what I did now.
I think it's because you've done it before and you're a magician, you've kind of overthought the process, right? And there was one key line, so this is a good point actually. I missed a key line, which was don't put it first or last letter. So that's what you did, I think. You put the G in the front end, so but that's fine. So yeah, so if people like obviously we can tell them that it went wrong originally and then take that out the other bit, but I'll leave it in because it just shows that.
Yeah, I think it does show, man. Because the thing is, it also shows. I know we're in an artificial context here, but like, I think, and Hungry and Hungover says this was great to see. I've been in a situation like several times, and if you end with a hit, forget the misses. It's all pushing through. So yeah, he's right on that.
Yeah. So the reason I didn't, because I'm not in full flow, it might have looked like I was a bit like, oh no, it didn't work. But it's kind of like, you know, if you just sort of have a way out of that, and you can plan on this as well. You know, you could say, okay, so that tells me like the next thing you'll be great with, you know, or something like this, and you just move forward because you're only ever going to like allow one failure in a set anyway, right?
Right.
But hopefully people can see that this. So I'm theoretically pretending to get not be able to get the first word, which is great because when they verbalize that, okay, oh, that makes sense. Typically, this is something, you know, more visual. Then, like that's on purpose because using the sui generis principle, that gives me the letter essentially, right?
Yeah.
So those who have the method will know that. So let's try something else, right? So I'll probably change the outs on this, but yeah, fuck it, we'll try it, right? Because again, I think this is something that you're probably too familiar with, but we'll try it anyway, right? So, because you mentioned another principle, so we'll try this.
Cool.
So what I want you to do is just allow different images to come into your mind. Okay, and just allow a few to float in. And this is just so that we can start to get in tune with each other's like thought processes. And now allow different characteristics to come into mind.
Okay.
And based on a few of these characteristics, just allow the name of someone close to you to just pop into your mind that you're reminded of through these characteristics.
Okay.
So just focus on this name. Okay, so this would be, so I'm going to go. And typically this would be on the table, right? So I'll just put it in front of me, but obviously you can't see, but people will know this principle as well. So just for everyone at home, what was the name you just thought of? I've committed to it.
Chris.
Okay, cool. Good. And there's a nice bit Pete Turner does, which I probably shouldn't pick.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Hold on. Let's try this.
there's a real nice thing he does at that point that I've started to do as well. And so just before they get to see what you've written, essentially, you would go, and then you're into the next bit. Anyway, I'll just carry on. So now I'd say, okay, before we get to that, I'll be honest with you. As we were getting in tune with each other's thoughts, there was a few images that came to me from your subconscious. So to try and get both of these, just focus on out of the images that came to me was a car, a truck, and a boat. So out of these, just think of which one intuitively stands out to you. And I'll try and get that as well.
All right. I'm spooked because he got.
So which image were you?
Well, it's funny. Yeah. So I went with a boat.
Cool. So we got boat and Chris.
What spooked me even more is like those were images that went through my head, and I'm like, wait a sec.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Now again, we do this. Now I'm recalling our conversation. We had and I was at the coffee shop down in my hometown. We were talking about this. Yeah. Okay. But that really spooked me for a second there, because I'm like, whoa, he actually got some like the main images too.
Right. And I mean, I butchered the fucking writing it because I had to. This pen for some reason is. So always make sure your pen works. I had to rewrite Chris, but the problem with that is I didn't rewrite it in the right moment in time for those that know about the one head principle. So just ignore the rough and ready performance, but you'll see there that I'm using like a one ahead.
Yeah.
And for me to showcase that, it's kind of the idea of like the principles Mendes, right? And you don't have to give the items. The spectator can come up with those on their own when you read the manuscript, and you can do like they put images in their pockets and now where they are and in the hand. So it's cool. It's like a Trojan horse, but you know, they come up with the images. But I love this. This is the principle used slightly differently as like a force. And what's cool is, like with one aheads before, typically the other piece of information that you use is kind of an anthem to sort of the routine. Like they would bolt on like a card prediction or effect with like a word, and it kind of don't make sense. Whereas I've justified the fact that I'm getting in tune with their thought processes to get the name. And what's cool is I'm calling back to like the earlier process where they were just allowing images to freely float through their mind. And what's cool is you have the excuse of this is from your subconscious mind. So even if they didn't consciously think of anything, you still just make them make a choice out of three. So hopefully that sort of demonstrates like how you can mix these principles and make it make sense with a presentation as well, right?
Yeah, it does fully, man. It fully does. I think seeing this too is, again, it people we've learned. What have we learned from this like brief experience? One, we've learned that even if it's not surefire, it doesn't fucking matter, dude.
Right.
Sometimes, like let's say like sui generis, like you can basically, because sometimes, and maybe you can comment on this too, because I want to hear your thoughts, because I think we've talked about this. When you're picking somebody to work with on this stuff, and I think you do this a bit unconsciously, and maybe you're not always consciously aware of it, but I've seen you get some people to do some compliance actions, right? You make sure you feel that you're in rapport, because if you try and do this for somebody that's just like, like a good example I think would be like, if you've ever said something to purposely wind up a northerner, they're in England, go on then. If it's one of them, it's so difficult. But if you get somebody that you can get compliance with, hey, come here and stand here for just a moment. Hey, can you hold your hand out? Perfect. Look at me. Awesome. concentrate. Can you just imagine a few things? And you look and you see the gears turning. I think the key thing is, do you see the gears turning? Like, like it's weird. Like, remember Cog and how it was kind of disappointing, I think, for everybody, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the proper stuff, right? It like hopefully people can see that there's a structure.
Yeah,
Like there's a real structure. There's sometimes you use an outs where you're fishing in a certain area, but
yeah,
it's kind of built so that it's as streamlined as possible, as quick as possible, and just is nice. Like I'll be honest with you. I thought we'd done the effect before and it would just go through, but I think because it was so familiar the first time,
yeah. And
like
the bad thing is,
magicians
I
think
think lost track.
right.
I'd seen it before.
Right, but what I want to make the point on is in performance, you would have a way to just sort of not let it matter that you shouldn't have this moment, and it's because we're in an interview environment. You shouldn't have a moment where it's just like, oh, that didn't work, and it seems to have affected you. Like it's all about how you frame stuff. And I think Enriquez talks about this. Like failure is only seen as failure if you frame it in that way, right? So you can still frame it as failure, and I wouldn't blame the spectator. You've got to be careful that you don't make them feel bad about it not working. But just as simply as just like, oh, this doesn't always work, but I think this next thing will work perfectly with you, something like that, right?
Right.
Which obviously didn't come across when I'm talking to a friend in an interview. So I just wanted to make that point clear, so that.
Oh yeah, I think everyone feels it's clear. I mean, even like Hungry Hungover is common is high five emoji. That was great, and I don't think that's sarcasm. I know this gentleman pretty well through our little kind of thing. So I think it was really valuable for everyone to see, honestly. So yeah, no, trust me, man. It's one of those things where I would like, the thing is, at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to this too, right? It's like if they mess it up and it's their fault, it's still your fault sometimes, right? And the reason,
right. You always put it on yourself, yeah.
yeah. But you've got real powers, man. You're a casual environment. Maybe you've had a few pints. It happens.
Yeah. And I thought, well, maybe you're just being a shit spectator today, but I'm going to still try and do it because I believe in this stuff. I know that this stuff hits and works. We could have ended up with two things not quite going well, but again, in the context of a performance, you wouldn't necessarily do it back to back. You would. But I knew that I'm comfortable enough with the material to sort of get that through. So hopefully it was a rough and ready sort of demo of a few bits.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not in any shape or form, like really in a proper performing mode, because, I go out and do it casually, but, I'm in writing mode at the minute. So my head's sort of in bits all over the place at the minute. So hopefully people still got something out of that, even though it's not like a real tight performance, like by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, dude, I think whether some of these people watching are, social performers, kind of like you and I are, or they're diehard pro, or they're pros out there working it and everything, right? Like they've had to go over and do these environments probably during the pandemic, like Zoom shows, things like that. Dude, it's so much harder to do this stuff without literally being able to reach out and just touch somebody's hands. I've found, and that's why this is kind of the grounds where you test a lot of things, because it is harder, I feel like. But still, when you kind of move out of the testing phase of something, you've kind of got it into doing it in the real world phase, and then you go back to testing phase again, testing conditions. It could be a tough transition sometimes. I don't think it translated wrong at all, man. So I want to talk a little bit about here the Eleusis deck, man. I've got two here. I loved it so much that I did the photography for it, and did the trailer right here from the desk and wrote the script and everything, basically talking about my points on it. So let's start off here. Like, what's been the reception, man? Like, I know what it's been, but for anyone that's not aware, because it is kind of still a little bit of a secret, for people, what's been the reception and what have you heard?
Yeah, so it's been received really well. Like when I was at Blackpool and I had like decks on me, I was sort of like selling them like hotcakes outside of outside like I won't say where, but you know, just when I demmed it, people just instantly wanted them. So yeah, it's really cool. And again, this is something that I've worked on for years, on and off. And last year it finally fell into place, like the final solution. So essentially, it's a marking system that allows you to read the back of a playing card, like whichever they take out from the deck, from like, you know, like 20 feet away or more. I think when I was filming the video project with my friend Mark Lemon, is that a joker?
Yeah, I was gonna say. For those of you, I guess we're switching back and forth. I randomly decided to grab a card and be a pain in the dick. I'd see it like, I wonder if he'll call it. And he says, "Is that a joker?" And yes, it is. It's that easy, boys and girls. Like, yeah, I have high def cameras, but I was sitting back there like this. You know, like you're not gonna be able to do that with your standard.
Yeah,
so
so Mark Lemon was in his kitchen, and it's sort of like annexed into the living room as well, so he could get as far back as possible. And I think it was like, I want to say like 40 foot away, you know, and he was still getting them. So it's like, you know, you can comfortably get a read from like 20 feet away, and especially and just as easily close up as well. And it's hidden via perception. So it's the negative white space essentially. But and the reason I talk about negative white space is because typically when we read something like writing on a billet, for instance, or a newspaper, or you know, we're looking at the black on the white background. So we're psychologically conditioned to take notice of the writing, for instance, or the pattern. So in this case, we would be looking at the red pattern, you know. And there's a illusion that you can Google, and I think it says the word Jesus, the one I saw, and it's the negative white space. So you know, people would show that to kids, and they would just see black blocks. But it's only when you perceptually realize that you should put the black to the background, and it's in reverse, that you would read the writing. So it's kind of built on this, so that it's hidden via perception. So people looking for anything should miss it because it's the background as opposed to the foreground. But as well as that, I purposely made the markings as bold as they can be. So it ended up with me thinking of it like this. I thought you can, you know, if you could read a marking that was essentially bigger, then you'd be able to read it from a distance. That's kind of where I went with it. And I know that other people have used sort of like negative space or white lines before, but this is what fitted the design that I was working on at the time, and it all just fell into place. And then as well as that, Mark Lemon came up with a different way to quantify or think of like the binary. So typically like a marking system would have like a 1, 2, 4, and 8. And then Mark simplified that so that it's easier to work with and easier to learn. But after, like, I don't know, an hour with the deck, you start to recognize patterns. So you just can end up sight reading rather than having to like add anything up.
it really does.
Cool.
It really does. Sorry to interrupt. I just want to really stress this because I think one of the biggest detractors from the beginning of this was like, and I remember reading it, and because what happens is, guys, this is human psychology. When our brains don't have clarity, or it doesn't wrap its, or if perceive something as difficult, we start to literally burn calories, and our body is extremely efficient. So what happens is we see something we don't understand, or it's not 100% clear, or maybe it seems daunting and difficult. Our brains begin to burn calories, and then what happens is fight or flight mode tries to direct it towards something that's more understandable. And when you hear this on the surface, can we talk about the marks and stuff? You think that's okay?
Yeah, it's fine. So I'll just continue covering why I think this is cool. So not only can you see them from a distance, because my original concept, like probably 8-10 years ago, was my original idea was, I wonder if there's a way of marking a deck that you can see from a distance as opposed to having to be close. But I wanted it to work close up as well. So like 5 foot away or in a normal situation, you can still read them, which was important. So, you know, originally, like the deck you mentioned before was kind of zigzag lines, and what that did is it created from a distance like shading that would then give you the exact letters or numbers. And only you could really see it if you knew what you was looking for. But you know, with later designs of that, like one of the problems with that is the back design didn't seem to have like a constant sort of design, like pattern, because it was just like random zigzags. So while I got away with that, and I still think it's quite a cool deck. The other versions where it would just be where you could literally see with shading, like perceptually, because it would like line weight and stuff. The problem with that is that people without their glasses on or from a distance could also read them. So that's when I started thinking in terms of like changing it to like a Powerball 60 type marking system, you know, like something that was, even if they saw it, which they're not really going to see it because perceptually they're not going to see it. Even if they did, they wouldn't know what they're looking for, so they wouldn't know what it meant. So what happens is, as well, is you end up with a symmetrical design because I've reflected it across the card. So not only does that help hide the markings, because if you just look at one card singly and you don't give them a chance to really compare anything, which you shouldn't be really doing in performance, just spectator management, right? It's balanced, so it just seems like they have to assume, well, that's the pattern and that's it. There's also this motif in the middle that always stays constant. So, you know, it's really well hidden. And as well as that, because it is reflected, if the spectator is holding the card and covering like a corner, for instance, you can still get the information from the opposite end. So even if they, you know, obscure some of the information, you can typically always get it. Like I remember at Blackpool, Keith Barry, like a good friend, he wasn't doing it on purpose, but he was like just holding it like this, and I was sort of behind, like, you know, to the side, and I thought, you know, that's pretty well covered, but I still got it based on this principle. So that was cool. So it shouldn't really matter how they hold on to it as well. But of course, with proper spectator management and stuff, you can have them, you know, hold the deck, like, you know, put the card down if you need to read it and stuff like this. But what you don't have to do anymore is sort of like have them put it in your hand so that it's in your sight line really close to you, because you can just be really sort of casual and just get the read like effortlessly, because there's not an issue with distance anymore, right? And it actually becomes easier, I think, without your glasses on for some people, depending on your eyesight. You
know, like, and the thing I was saying earlier, guys, is when you read the instructions, it looks and sounds like, oh man, I gotta associate this to this. But what the thing is, and Fraser and I've talked about this, because the first time he sent me one of these, I'm going, oh man, I don't know how this is going to be. And then he said, okay, listen, just quiz yourself with it for 20 minutes. Just do it. Trust me. I did it. It's intuitive now. Now, you just make a cut, and I know instantly, you know, what that identity of that card is. Like, it's.
So try a few with me. I don't know if your camera's reversed, so I might get the suit wrong.
All right, so let's grab rando number 1.
So 2 of spades.
Yep.
Before it even comes into focus.
Yeah, before the camera even caught focus too. Again, that shows the guy, for our folks that have bad eyesight. So let's go for that one.
Yeah, so that would be the 8 of diamonds, if I've not forgotten my own system. Yeah, cool. Because I'm just in writing mode at the minute, so that's why my head's so like seemingly all over the place. But,
I want to say too, guys, one of the things that's kind of not, it's said in the ad copy, but I want to emphasize it because this has been really good for me. And it's a little bit of it's just like a little bit of a product placement, but it's not, just because I've used these with this. It includes a double backer, which, you know, I personally use the double backer for Patrick Redford's Glim and a few other things, right? So this is great. Like for a lot of effects. I will say this, for those of you that have the marked, you're either Magic Stream members or you have any thought of card to pocket, you can do a really kick-ass walk far away version of any thought of card to pocket, the Christian Grace version of that, with this deck, where, because you can just read it so easily. I've even after this, Fraser. We'll if you have 10 or 15 minutes after this, I want to show you actually what I've done with it on the side of. I made it a
Mm.
three-phase thing, but I'll love to show you that. But yeah, this thing is absolutely great for the Mark deck version of Any Thought of Card to Pocket. For those of you that know what I'm talking about, it's great. For that.
Great, yeah. I mean, we did a project as well, like me and Mark Lemon, when I was back in England, and that's on my website. And we've
Yeah,
also
you can
sold
send it to me still. I want to see it. I don't know what
that. Oh, really?
I want to. Yeah, dude, I want to see what this no 2 of hearts card is.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah. So that's for another effect as well, right? Yeah, I'll send you it when we get off this. But that was cool because like like I sold that to Murphy's as well. So Murphy's now have got stock of this, and it should be in pretty much every magic shop. I've personally only got, I think, 10 decks left. Um, so if anyone from this wanted to grab them, like message me, and because magic shops are only allowed to sell one deck at a time, whereas I can do like a deal on the last 10 decks if you want to do that. The other reason, like, not only am I like super proud of this, and it's something that Jacob wanted to talk about because it's quite new, like it's just kind of come out this year, or they got sent off this year, right? But this was originally a Kickstarter, so I've also just last week I launched a new Kickstarter for a black edition of this. So I wanted to sort of mention that so that anyone because obviously stock is going to run out eventually of the red deck. So if you wanted to help bring the black deck to life, then that means that this is a deck that hopefully can keep on getting reprinted. So that's on Kickstarter right now. Black Edition, Ellusius Mark deck.
And
if people check that out and back it.
let me see here real quick because I kind of want to make sure like I want to actually pull up. I'm gonna pull this into Ellusius Black Edition. There we go. Let me pull up the Kickstarter itself, and I'll share screen because I want you guys to see kind of like what these look like too, because they are friggin' gorgeous, man. Like, again, and I'm not just blowing a bunch of smoke. Like these literally look fantastic. So let me get into my screen share mode here and transition over, and we'll take a look at that really quick. So yeah, you can see on here. Let me make sure it's going on the live. Well, it's a few seconds behind here, but that should be going on the live stream all right. But you can like clearly see. Oh, I'm on the live stream. Whoops. You can clearly see like it's a beautiful, beautiful like deck here, right? So, if you want to support this, we'll go ahead and I'll adjust the comment down below, and I highly recommend that you check this out essentially. So it's great. You're gonna get the black tuck case. The reds. It's sad they're coming in. So is there any chance of the reds coming back and stuff too?
I imagine once they've sold out, then that'll be it. I imagine, unless one of the companies decides to just completely rebuy them. But yeah, because I've done it through a Kickstarter, so I decided I would try and do a black edition through the Kickstarter as well. So it really depends on them being funded, I think. Else, I don't know how long they're selling quite well, the red deck. So, so eventually stock will run out.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Like again, guys, go check this out. It's on Kickstarter. You're supporting obviously like independent magic. It's really, really, really something that it should come to fruition. So that being said, let's look a little bit more into like some of your other influences, man. Because we've talked to obviously you and I have kind of talked over the years on magic, like I magic, music, kind of everything. Like outside of magic, what are like your hobbies and interests? What kind of like excites you, really?
So we mentioned like music, that's really important, like Radiohead. Like, you know, I kind of need music to keep moving forwards. And like, I think as well, like when I'm writing as well, like if I struggle to write, or, you know, I've found that it's useful to read, like put input in as opposed to just having to get stuff out, you know. So, and it can also inform the creative process. So reading, I like to do that as well. It's something that I hadn't done for a while, for years, but I've started getting back into. So I read like strange esoteric books on like real magic. And, you know, like philosophy, like Buddhism, and, you know, so that, I like that, and I like to watch films as well, but they typically have to be sort of good films. Like, you don't always know until you've watched it, right? But, you know, I'm not one for sort of watching Netflix series unless, like, I've heard that they're really good, because I kind of prefer the shorter form of film. Like something that I think is great. It's like British comedians from the League of Gentlemen. So Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton, they've got a series called Inside Number 9, and for me, it's quite dark sort of comedy. But for me, it's kind of like a masterclass in short story writing, and the format's perfect because it revolves around a different room or situation each episode. They've got a set sort of length of like 40 minutes, and you can't believe what they managed to achieve in like plot twists and stuff like this within that short space of time. So I prefer, like, you know, like film, for instance, because it's like at 90 minutes, and, you know, and it's a great format, because the Netflix stuff tends to just go on and on and on and on, but and like in a series, and I just don't think it's a nice way to tell a story.
Yeah,
For that reason.
it loose ends, doesn't it?
Right, and just too long. So another thing is documentaries as well. So, like, you know, I'm interested in like factual stuff, like maybe about bands and stuff. So like recently I looked at Joy Division stuff because I love Joy Division. So I like watched the film Control, like about Ian Curtis and the band, and, you know, like documentaries sometimes about bands and stuff like this. So yeah, just kind of like looking at different arts, and like comedy as well. Another person who like is incredible, like he's dead now, but Andy Kaufman, like he was kind of like a real magician, or he was kind of like the first troll, but to do it in real life, to the point where people didn't know what was real and what wasn't anymore, really. Even his manager and people around him struggled to know. So like when he got cancer, they didn't believe he had it. He thought it was just another bit, you know, like a comedy bit. So an example, and I found this video fairly recently and sent it to Mark Lemon because I told him about Andy Kaufman, and he loves him as well because of this illusion sort of that's happening. There's a great like video that I found where his manager, he used to be in on some of the bits and the comedy sketches. So he's in, I think, the Improv nightclub in New York, I think it is, and the guy starts heckling him, like his manager pretends to be a heckler, right? So he says, oh, and he gives up the bit. He sort of says, oh, well, you know, he told me to just play along and say this and interrupt him at this stage. You know, he thinks of it as like creating a variation on like a overture, as if he's like this creative genius, you know, and they start falling out from the heckler from the crowd, but it's actually his manager. So there's great stories. And just another one before we change the subject. He did a skit for Saturday Night Live where he walks off the stage and it's live, and it was on purpose, it was planned, but they wanted it to look like it impromptu, like it had just happened. So they come back after the break, and I don't think they explained it until the next week, right? So then he's back the next week to explain, you know, this was something new, this was something avant-garde we was trying out, we was, you know, and then what he does is he turns it around, right? So he's saying that it was a setup, and then he just stops and goes, I can't do this. They've told me to say it was a setup. It wasn't, you know, and then they have to cut off air for real, because he's just completely flipped it on. The producers didn't know he was going to do that. Like, the guy was an absolute genius. So he's really an interesting person to look into. There's been books written about him. I think Jim Carrey in the film as well, Man on the Moon.
Man on the Moon, yeah.
Just genius. He was a genius. So yeah, like seeing how illusion and stuff can sort of fit into other art forms and stuff like that, you know. Like, for me, magic should be one of the highest art forms because it deals in mystery. Whereas I think music is the most immediate, you know, and then probably film. So it's something that I've put off, and I think we can make magic an art, you know, and Kenton's got some good thoughts on that and work on it as well, like using metaphor and stuff like that. But it's something that I've just sort of put off because I sort of, you know, wanted to focus on sort of the how as opposed to translating something, you know, artistically, you know, in the same way you would like songwriting with lyrics or something like that, or poetry or something, you know. So that's something that I think I do want to eventually do more of, but I'm not sure. I've just been putting off all these years.
Yeah, I mean, everything there is a season, right? You know, it's one of those things too where I know we've talked about this too in the past, where you're the type of guy, you'll obsess over an idea for a while and you'll hit like a breaking point on it, and you're like, okay, I got to put that away in this notebook for a bit, and when it feels right, you come back to it and you complete it, right? I think same thing with that, man. Just like eventually you're gonna wake up and realize it's time.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I sort of wish I'd got into music. Like, I'm really passionate about magic, and that's what I love doing. But music would be more immediate, I think. But it's probably because I haven't really tried to push it into those realms yet, you know. But I know Kenton has, and he's done really well with that. So people should check that out. If like Mystery by Association, I think, is a good work on that.
Yeah, he's in, you know, people don't really, I think, know as much as they should, like how just insane of a musician Kenton Nepper really is. Like, the guy can play anything, even like sing. Like, you could give him, he could probably go to a home if there's some good crystal, you know, not meth. I'm talking about glassware, folks. He grabs some good crystal glassware, and the guy could probably do a concert literally with water and glassware, doing like, you know, singing glasses. Like, he's that level of just like prolific, it seems like, in music. You know, and we only know him for the prolific side of mentalism and magic, but for God's sake. But yeah, thanks for sharing all that with all of us. You know, like I know we kind of go on about a lot of more outside stuff than we do inside stuff in magic anymore. So it's cool that people get to see that, like, looking in view as well, that outsider's view too, of like, yeah, I love magic, I love mentalism, I do this stuff, but these are some of my other passions that people maybe don't know about. You know, I always think that's a good thing. So, man, give me like a bizarre, you know, I know we've had plenty. I know we've talked about plenty over the years. Give me like a bizarre, unexpected performance experience, man. Like something that, like, when you did it, it either shook you for good or it shook you for bad. You know, where you're like, whoa, how in the actual F did that just happen? Or, you know, and that could be in the way of an unexpected, like, remarkable hit, or just like, wait, did that kid just tell me to tighten up my script?
So,
that one.
So one of the nicest moments I ever had wasn't me performing. It was there's this girl, and I think I said to her, you know, it was probably after a performance or something. You know, I said to remind her to that you can learn from the past, but you don't need to be dragged back into it. And then, like, a few weeks or months went down the road, went by, and she said, "Oh, have you got any life-changing, like anything life-changing to say to me again?" And it had really helped her, you know. So I suppose that's what you can do with magic, is you could put in metaphor and stuff like that, you know, like, you know, sort of like philosophy, like as an artistic expression, and potentially really help people. So that was nice. The other times, that I remember are kind of like when I've had a skeptic or something like that, and I go, fuck it, then I'll just do it for real. And so I end up like just giving a reading, and really specific as well, because I'm using like some of Kenton's stuff, like mind reading, like the first mind reading book
Mhm.
by the school, and completely cold, and just nailing real specific things, because that was the purpose of it, to be able to do that. And if you know the work, then you can do that. And this girl who was really skeptical went from sort of not believing a thing to just mouth open, asking a friend how the hell I knew this stuff, you know. So, and then of course we've all got sort of horror stories. I think one time, about 8 outs from, oh, I better not say what it's from because it will tip it. But I had like 8 different outs on me, and they fell like out of a pocket, and you know, I just had to brush it off and say, oh, that's they're the other attempts, like other people's thoughts. If, you know, and I was just like, well, there you go. So yeah, we've all had stuff, but that's, you know, it's gonna happen. But typically with failure, I'm not bothered about it, right?
Yeah.
I think because I haven't performed like outside of casual situations, and because we're in an interview before, it was kind of like, you know, like I didn't know whether it was just because you're a magician or I've shown you before that things weren't quite going the way I wanted them to. But you know, we got it to work at the end, so that's cool.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's all that matters, man. Is that, and again, like we said to everybody else, that tells me everything you know about you. So let's do something for real. Let's do a reading. You know, there's always that great trade-off there. It's just so nice. Man, so obviously we've gone over a lot here. We've kind of talked outside of magic. We've covered like a Eleusis deck and everything. I kind of want to like kind of wrap it up here in a bit by like, what were some things like people that want to develop this stuff? Because I think that you've pioneered a lot of this, just like kind of Kenton before you. You've kind of created your own unique approach and schooling into this, and you're always on like coming up with ideas, testing this stuff. You seem like you're one of those collaborative guys too. Like there's always a Lennon McCartney kind of team, it seems like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I've stopped doing that more recently, because I just, you know, have my own sort of focus on my own work typically. But I think like when I was with Ross Taylor, it was cool. It felt like we're in a band, you know, a bit like the Lennon McCartney thing, right? Without comparing ourselves to those. But I think I prefer creating on my own. I think
Yeah.
I think it's just because like in Second Coming, it felt like Ross was sort of taking the reins and sort of coming up with more, which shouldn't matter. But it kind of, and it's just an ego thing, I think. But you know, I kind of like the feeling of, you know, like, oh, that came from me, you know. So, but then when you go back and forth with people, that can inspire something in you. So that can be a really cool process as well, and a great way to get things that you wouldn't necessarily get to. So it is important to work with other people. But at the minute, I just prefer to, like, no one ever creates in isolation, I don't think. Like, I think you're always looking to the past, you're always looking to what your peers are doing, you're always inspired from other people. So I'm not saying that you can do it in isolation, but as much as possible, I like the idea of discovering something for myself, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's what I mean.
Yeah, I can agree with that, man. Like, it's great to jam out ideas, but you should at least. It's good. It's better almost to have it as your own unique little thing first, right? Like, I'll give an example the other day. Like, who was that? And plus, too, even among like good friends, sometimes, and we've all seen it. Like, I mean, John Cornelius, I think, is a story of this. If you share a really killer idea to the right or the wrong person, and they kind of come up with their own variation of it, which if they publish it first, then it's you versus them, and it's produce the proof, which can happen too. But it's good, I think, to have the original ground rooting thing before you let the tree kind of grow into something else, right? You have to have a grounded idea first. So what kind of like tips would you give to people that really want to start developing this stuff? They want to really go out and do more of. I know we've given a lot of tips to them, but what would you say if they want to do more of the development side and they really want to be like, yeah, I want to think on this level. I want to align with this thinking. I want to have this pure experience too, and I want to create experiences like this that are unique and different. What would
Yeah.
you say basically?
So I think like learn what's come before, because sometimes people end up recreating things that, because obviously me and a few other people have thought about this for a while now. It's you find people come across things that you've already thought about or disregarded some of the time. So sort of read around it, read as much as you can, I suppose. And but as well as that, like just come up with your own way to do something as well, because it probably hasn't been done, right? So I'm not saying that you need to know, because I mean, to be honest with you, I hadn't read Corinda when I started to try and create stuff. And I don't think that really mattered, because it meant that I was coming up with completely different ways to do things, right? So I'm not saying you have to read other people's stuff, but it would help you to start thinking along those lines, I think, if you wanted to do Propless and stuff like that. A lot of what I find is like up and coming people, or people that are new to trying to create in this way, is it tends to be overbearing with process. Like I can tell that there's too much weight in a certain area, or it's too overbearing. So always try and streamline things, and sometimes it's a case of finding leverage somewhere. Like, does one thing kind of solve another aspect of what you're working on? So it's really to do with trying to find the most elegant solution a lot of the time, it within the context of using words and it being proper, because some people might argue that you're just getting to write it down and then you can do whatever presentation you want.
Yeah.
And that's an oversimplification for the opposite end of the argument. But I don't think they have to be opposite ends of an argument. I think it's just approaches and styles, and mixing methods as well is useful, like we've said before. So yeah, just play around, have a play, like that's what turns me on. That's what I kind of get out of bed for, is being able to have this creative life. When I've got an idea I'm working on, it's cool. It's like, it's nice to remember, oh, I'm working on that, or I can think about that later, or when I'm on a walk or something like that. It's kind of what keeps me going.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think it's important to tell people too, like, I think a really good example of, because the Propless stuff too, like if we take out Propless for a second here, pure, like to an extent, like you can still take Propless thinking, apply it to physical things you already have, like very much, excuse me, folks, very much on the side of like, I think a great example of this is like, remember when you helped Robert Watkins write Jhana. There's a bit in there called what was that called? Is it Severance? Yes, because we did a project for that.
Yeah.
Severance. And what I loved about Severance was, yeah, you had this, it was a billet, but you had this Propless thinking to it of where words kind of, it made a snake that ate its own tail. Like I had an edition, I think I've told you about it. I had to, where I would say they'd write this thing down. I'd hover my hand over and say, now what I'm picking up on right now is this. And just so everyone's on the same page here, right now you're only thinking of your star sign. And there's only one thing written down on that piece of card, right? And they go, yes. And you go, perfect. So what I want you to do is just start mixing it later, and you're into it from there, right? And you could replace that with any of the guesses and stuff, but you're taking that Propless thinking, that thinking of, okay, how can we use verbal subterfuge here to hide and add another layer of deception, right?
Yeah,
So
so it's mixing methods essentially, and getting a shortcut sometimes because it's quicker sometimes to sort of say something or shift something in their mind. So yeah, there's that. Another reason, like like working with other people, like stylistically, my stuff's quite different.
very.
So I tend to sometimes take, like, not always finish stuff, but like if someone comes to me with something and I might be able to help them finish it, or see like the better way, like the more streamlined way, or so I do enjoy working with other people. But it's I kind of another thing is that like a lot of income comes from like being creative as well and sort of working on it. So it's not always viable to sort of share profits either,
Yeah.
in this climate, yeah. But it's great having certain close friends to soundboard things and jam. Like Ross Bartels will know that I've kept him up at night sometimes while he's been thinking of something that I'm working on, and then we end up seeing certain insights at the same time. And he's like, "Are you up, bro?" I'm like, "Yeah." It shouldn't be at like 2 a.m.
Yeah.
But that's when I sort of go deep on something,
All the best ideas come in, isn't it? It's like, oh, I should be resting my brain and recouping for the next day because I've got to do X, Y, and Z, which is adult stuff, or whatever these responsibilities are. But fuck, do I have this great idea for this any card
Yeah.
number or this name guess or this pin code, and it comes to you at those times, and they're always the best ideas too.
Yeah, so I sort of I do go like weeks or months without creating anything. So I can sort of leave it and pick it up again. But and I typically don't work at night anymore. Like I tend to sort of stop. Like I say, I tend to write in the morning now. Like if I'm working on something, I might, because I enjoy the process of losing myself in it, I might do that until like late afternoon. But I used to not have like a cut off for work. I used to just do it whenever, and it could be at night. I'd be writing as well. So it's kind of whenever it's something that I enjoy. So it's like a hobby, I suppose, as well. Like so it's something that I do because I enjoy it.
It's
And
therapeutic.
then like I said before, if there's other things going on in your life or or you don't feel like you've really got a lot happening, you've still got magic. Like it's always there. Like it will never leave you. And people who are close to me will know why that sort of means so much, right? With
Yeah.
what I've been through recently. So,
Yeah, yeah, man, it's crazy. Like I think like you're saying, right? Like I mean, I took a 2-year break from it and it felt like there was like a chunk missing, right?
mm,
Not just the community, but like just the act of going out and occasionally being like, hey, here, just look, boom, and doing just something simple like to just
yeah,
assist people and just break their day up from the monotony that they've got, right? And I think it's really special what we can share. And I think the more we treasure it and the more we treat it kind of like the way you're saying, man, the better off the art form is really.
yeah. So like recently, I feel you've had someone on your mind, and the reason I've just gone into this is because, uh, like, I get impressions. So I just like sometimes I don't finish a thought, and then that can keep me up as well at night. So recently, you've had someone on your mind. I think this is a male person beginning with J, and I don't think it's an obscure name.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't think it's someone that you've mentioned as well. Like, can you think of who this is without saying the name?
Yes.
Okay, so just focus on, like, who is this? Like a friend or someone close? It's not someone I could just guess because it's someone you've talked about, is it?
No, no, no.
Okay, so whoever this is, just focus on the name written in front of you. Okay, and just if you can abbreviate it and think of it in its shorter form, and do that. So this is like, I think you're already thinking of it in its short form. This
Yeah.
is like, okay, four letters.
5.
Oh, five. Yeah. So you couldn't abbreviate it. That's my impression originally. So So I'm going to go with this. So like, just say what it is.
Jason.
Jason. Okay, I should have used it fucking out there, but I've got James. So this is a good time. This is a good time to show you a nice out, right?
This is a great.
So,
I think I know what you're about to show him. This is the way.
So the reason I'm putting this on the end as well is because not everyone will get to the end. So it's a nice little tip. So I was a bit overconfident there. I would normally use an out, but again, it doesn't matter. We're just jamming, like we're just messing about. So I would write the first out, right? So it's either James or Jason at that point, based on the method. It could be Jamie, but you're going to take James as a hit for Jamie, right? So I'd write James, and then I would pretend to cross out like this, turn over, and then write the other out. So Jason. I blow and then just put it to my chest. So now just name the person you were thinking of.
So Jason.
Good. And then I just show this side, Jason. And what's great is psychologically you assume that the other side must be crossed out. So it makes a two-way out definitive as one out. But obviously it's not crossed out. So I'm just pretending to cross out. So that's cool. So you just write the first out, pretend to cross out as if you're changing your mind, switch over, that covers this, write the second out. I blow on it just because it's a Sharpie, so I like that. And then I do like a half paddle move. So basically I'm just sort of flipping it against my chest, or it can go to the table. Now I just show whichever side is relevant. You know?
He is confident to get out of the way afterwards.
Yeah, so I was a little bit too, I should have just used the out. But again, it's, you know, I mean, that's something I've not done for a while. I think the last time I did that was mind selection, and an interesting thing happened there, right? So I got down to the two outs, and it was great, right? So Tahar, my friend, was on stage, and so I show him, and I realize that I've shown him the wrong side, right? Because I can see the correct name here. So I just went, oh, I showed you the wrong side, turned it over, got my reaction from him, and then showed the audience, got my reaction from them. And it was only after the lecture that I realized what had happened, right? So I forgot to tip that method. So no one knew any different. Like they just assumed, they had to assume that I just showed him the crossed outside by accident. So the illusion was still 100% solid.
That's actually really cool.
Yeah. Cool. Even though I felt like I'm sort of like fucking up here, it didn't matter, and I thought, well, that went well, considering, but it's because they were still operating from the illusion, which was great. You know?
It's very much like, I mean, in a lot of ways, it kind of feels like a very similar but different variation. Was it called X marks the spot back in the day, or The Secret? What was that called by Kenton?
Yeah, The Secret, I think.
Yeah, that I use that one a lot too. I'm gonna start using this one. I forgot about this, dude.
Or the X principle. Yeah, no, this is cool. It can be used as a one ahead as well. You know, but it's my favorite two-way out because it's definitive.
Full visual right there, and you're covered pretty much.
It's great for the back end of star signs as well, because if, like, maybe I'm tipping too much, but we can chop this off from the live stream, right? I think
not easily, but it'll be all right.
Right. Okay. So typically a star sign would be a three-way out.
Yeah.
With the way I get to it. Not always, but I've got methods that do that. So what's great is you can throw one out, and people with my work will know about that. And then and the way you throw it out means you're not compromised in terms of, like, it doesn't seem like you're trying to guess anything. And then you can write the two that are left over and then ask them for it. And then you've got this definitive out, which is really nice.
I really like that.
So it kind of cleans up when you're down to 3 outs as well.
Yeah. I still think, let's see, you showed me your latest star sign, but it's been a while. I still think if I had to go for my favorite star sign by you, and I need to get it like actually. I'll tell you my problem is, and I'll tell you, I'm asked. This will be a question just personally for me. Double check here and everything. My question, and make sure there's another question of anybody else. I want to excluding myself. I won't put myself over the viewers, but any tips for memorizing those star signs, dude? Because I can't get it worth a flying F, and it's so bad.
You just do it, like just root memory. So what I've done is I've put the months, like obviously have correlate to numbers naturally, right?
Yeah.
But I root memorize them, like memory peg them. And then I've got the star sign that I associate with that number. So I can at any point in performance go really quickly from star sign to month and back, which is important because you should be able to do it effortlessly in performance. So just it's only 12. And then the way I memorize them, if I'm dealing with like which half of the month they're in, or like a month gives you two star sign outs because of the crossovers. I know that I can just go back one number or forwards depending on how I've remembered them, and that's it. But it is definitely worth doing the work. Like and just really just spend some time with it, you know. And I think that's easier than learning like a poem or something, because then it's different from root memory. That's then sequential. So you would have to always run through the poem to get to the correct thing, item or month. Whereas if you memory peg so that the numbers, months, and star signs go together, as soon as you hear one, you know the other because it's root memory. So that's important to learn that. Yeah.
So basically, it's got to suck it up and really get it grained in there.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah, so we're losing light now. I think I don't know how long we've done. 2.5 hours, I think. So,
Yeah, we've done some time. Viewers, if you've been with us this whole time, thanks. We really appreciate it. And Thomas, yeah, Thomas says steep price for a marked deck, but they look cool though. Let's say this, Thomas. Yeah, they look cool, but they function even better.
yeah, it's Carter Monday B9 finish stock as
Oh
well.
yeah,
So
like
that I didn't mess about. They're like the proper. Yeah.
They are beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
But
And they last a while, right? Like yours, you've still had your deck for months, right?
I've had mine
Yeah.
for like 3 months now. Bearing in mind, like one of these I keep at home, and this is what I work with kind of here. And this one goes out, and I mean I can show you guys the wear, the close-up wear and tear over time. And these are like I discovered there's a beer stain on them. They've gone through the ringer. Let's see if we can get a good
Yeah.
there. And they're definitely not as pristine as they were out of the box, but they've held up really, really, really well. And like just get a brick of them, man. And the thing is, like, treasure them, because if you can be the person that gets the 10 decks he's got now, for example, keep one unopened. eBay, 5 years. You're welcome. So that being said, we've been going for a while. We are losing light. So, let's kind of wrap things up. It looks like we're kind of good on the question side for people right now. Fraser, I kind of want to close things off by leaving it open, man. What do you want people to know? What's important to you, and speak your truth right now, man. Just kind of take it, and the Kickstarter, obviously we're going to direct them over to that as well, and I'll make sure I change the description down here in the comments to direct that. But say your truth, brother.
Yeah. So basically, like, I want to thank my fans for like staying with me throughout the years and for supporting me, because it means that I can create stuff exclusively, pretty much. So I want to thank them primarily. I've also, I'm writing a book that I mentioned before, which will probably go on pre-order soon. So that the thinking behind that is to release it in a format similar to like the model with albums in music. So like an album and singles. So there'll be like a hardback book, and then some of the effects will be separate, will be PDFs that you can get singly. But not everything will be released as PDFs that's in the bigger book, right? So you can either get it the bigger book, and the idea with that is to do a pre-order on it for like a month or something, and people who pre-order the book will get the PDFs as well, right? So that's my thinking, and this is work that I've been working on or had for like the past 8 months. So it's kind of and the thinking behind it is kind of like, I want this to be the book that if that didn't exist when I got into mind reading and magic. So if you want like my work, like you would only really need this book. That's kind of the idea, Obviously not everything's going to be in it, but I'm going to, I think, try to get most, if not all of sort of like my go-to or best principles in one place. But it's not meant to be like it's not like a collection of everything. It's new stuff, and as well, and as well as like refinements of older thoughts. So I don't want people to think that it's kind of me just collecting things like an anthology. It's not that. It's it's the book that I want to be sort of most proud of. That I just need that book. That's it. If that makes sense. But I've changed the concept on it a little bit while writing it, so maybe it won't be that by the time it goes on pre-order. But that's kind of where I'm at the minute. I'm just sort of enjoying the fact that trying to remember that why I got into magic and wanted to create my own stuff. And this book is kind of what I'm holding on to as that's going to be the outcome of kind of remembering who I am as a magician.
I love that.
If that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, I think it makes total sense. I think a lot of people out there will really, feel that and everything. I know when the intention of a book, the intention's right going into it, you can just feel it through, you as the reader can feel it heavily. And, I'm sure this is going to be the best of the best. You've been really fortunate in the sense that you've had an upward climb, in my opinion. I'm a little biased because, we've known each other for years and I know and use this stuff, but I've only seen an upward climb pretty much in the quality of the works you're putting out. So I'm really excited to see what this next pinnacle is going to be. And I'll tell you, I'm excited more than that though, is what happens when you go, this stuff's okay, and you jump to the next level. Because I know that's always what the horizon is pretty much with you. So yeah. Thank you so much for carving out this time.
I'm always kind of looking for, like Mendes kind of did that. It kind of went to another level where it was like, shit, like how is that even possible? But yeah, but I'm purposefully as well. I'm really aware of sort of if something's not good enough as well. So things get dropped, and then I'll probably come back to them. But I want it to be really like, I want you to feel like you own like a real magic book, which I've kind of wanted with all of my work, and I think I've got there in different ways and on different occasions. But this is the latest work, essentially.
And I agree. That's what it feels like when we're reading one of Fraser's books. And again, to as we kind of close this off here, guys, make sure again, if you really want to get into this stuff, I can't put this enough out there. Find whatever's going to get you certain to go out and just try it. Get something like Opus. See this stuff in action, because on paper, it's just like what I was saying at the Mark deck earlier, right? On paper, it reads, this is going to be difficult. In 20 minutes of coaching and having visual aids, you're going to be able to do it, man. You just have to find, your middle ground, to find your certainty and to basically practice in the methods with a safety net, and then you can fly without a net before you know it, right? Now, there are a lot of stuff, again, that Fraser, you can just be like a spell. You just read it and effect happens. The bold force is big on that. For example, from I can't remember what book that was in. You know what I'm talking about?
Book of Fallen, I think.
Book of the Fallen, yeah. So that being said,
it's on Opus as well. So again, like a lot of stuff is on Opus. So if you the best thing to do is go to my website. So www.fraserparker.co.uk, and you'll see sort of like the more recent releases. And if you want anything, like message me, because I can sometimes help people out with deals and stuff like that. So
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, that being said, we're losing a lot of light quickly on Fraser's side, and I know there it's like what 6 or 7 o'clock versus 2 o'clock here in EST.
yeah, it's getting late now. So yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
a good place to sort of wrap. Yeah.
We'll wrap her on up here. Fraser, thank you so much for coming on here again, man. 8 years later.
Yeah.
And dude, I'm sure we'll have you back here eventually and be talking about some new exciting things. Everyone, again, go support the Eleusis Black Edition. Go check out fraserparker.co.uk. Pick up Opus, pick up a book. Keep an eye out for his latest release coming out here. And thank you all so much for joining. And that being said, cheers.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Oh, I'm trying to sign off here actually, but now somehow I've been on my cursor's stuck. So temporary almost sign off. Why is my cursor stuck on my? There we go.
That's not good. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, that was almost